Zephyr said we will start with the board and not the keys. So each brand has its own way of identifying a keyboard. Let's use these example. TKL, which means 10 key less. Typically a TKL is a common keyboard that only removes the number pad. You retain arrow keys and function keys like PRNT screen and home, PG up etc. 60%, often the smallest keyboard at only 61 keys. These models chop off as much of the keyboard as they can and minimize its profile in most situations. These two are the most common. Moving away from the board, let's go over what is in it. Switches, that makes letters appear on a screen, super cool. Switches are the super technical aspect and bias aspect of being a keyboard modder. Brands you will encounter are typically Kyle, Cherry, Gateron. Typically a person entering the modding space will be entering the community with Linear Red's Cherry, Clicky Blue Cherry, or Tactile Brown Cherry. Zephyr said Cherry the brand has its own stem system, as seen above with two wires on the left and a stem in the center. Cherry is the most common replicated switches and are the most commonly encountered switches for most people in mechanical keyboards. However, it should be noted that a lot of brands will solder their switches into the PCB, so does this mean total loss for your old board? No, thankfully desoldering is a easy slow process. Get yourself a solder supplies, and a solder sucker and get them bad boys off. Just remember to make sure they are the variant you are looking for. Kali, Cherry or Gateron, second note stem and wire systems are not universal, and have their own subcategory. The terminology above tactile, clicky, or linear, are definitions for these switches. I.E. Gateron hot swap and Cherry hot swap are not compatible. Zephyr said what about keycaps? Aren't they all the same? No. Zephyr said keycaps have their own uniqueness and qualities, and some are preferred over other keyboard options. For example, I am typing this on a custom keyboard, so let's see if you can understand with the information you have. I am using a TKL OEM Glorious Panda Cherry. Zephyr said what is this about loop? Zephyr said looped switches, and dry switches are two different things entirely. Some people pre-buy their switches looped for a reason we will get to in a bit. Zephyr said but some switches, specifically salvaged switches or hybrid switches, or Chimera switches, do occasionally occur with loop and dry users. I prefer my scratchy feel in my switches and typically don't loop, and the extra friction and resistance is good for me. I like a heavy switch. So if you read that and went what? Let's get into it. Salvage switches are usually cheap switches you get off eBay, and it's just been dubbed a salvage job. This can just be already heavily used switches, dry or looped. Rare switches like Cherry Blacks. Zephyr said looping switches is a popular project among keyboard nerds. You can get special kits made to open up switches to apply a special loop to switches to change how they feel, react, and sound. The loop most commonly used is Honkit, at least according to Amazon at the time of posting. Zephyr said so what is a hybrid switch? A hybrid switch most commonly is a spring change in a switch. Many switches have special histories in the hybrid space, making them a sought-after mod, pre-made or self-made, making many hybrid switches projects for people trying to make their own switches. I.E. Cherry Red mod that occurs from time to time, is to separate the key, and change it to a brown switch and looped. This makes its own switch unique from both it comes from. Chimera switches are when you take apart multiple types of switches. I.E. taking apart a cherry blue switch, to put the stem in a brown for a different press than both, and replacing the spring with a Durock 67G2 stage spring, creating a 100% unique switch to your board. Zephyr said, but what about my RGB? Just buy the correct switches or mod the correct switches to achieve the effect and feel you want. With most projects you will need to make concessions, make pro and con list, and weigh it for yourself. Zephyr said, what about my specialty keyboard with special extras? You can mod specialty keyboards. i.ejj Tech Giant touchscreen keyboard. As long as you practice and take your time, you can desolder every switch, mod them to your liking, and then resolder them in. Zephyr said, as long as you don't damage any extra components, all mechanical keyboards can be modded. Zephyr said, well, everyone's favorite part. Zephyr said, sound. Zephyr said, so this is where I will end the dirty guide. Your sound preference is yours. If you want a crazy loud keyboard that rattles its dry unloved salvage switches on 60% with anime girl keycaps, the more power to you. Zephyr said, odd questions. Why are some custom boards weighted or heavy? Weights in a keyboard are commonly placed there to achieve several effects. One can change the sound and feel of a keyboard. Heavy keyboards are often found because of the very thunk or solid sound they can produce. Some people will tape their keyboard PCB, circuit board, bottoms to further dampen sound, or even use foam to fill out hollow spaces. Zephyr said, Bluetooth mods, 2.4 USB dongle, anti-ghost, what are those all about? So Bluetooth mods are exactly what it sounds like. It's a kit to add Bluetooth capabilities to a keyboard that is compatible, or comes with Bluetooth out of box. Typically they have a way to switch between these frequencies to control multiple computers at once. This can be used with a laptop, desktop, and phone all at the same time, and can be useful for super users. Anti-ghost. Anti-ghosting denotes a keyboard's ability to support a unique key press even when you have simultaneous key presses with more than 2 to 3 keys at a particular time. It can happen during gameplay when you press the keyboard keys very frequently. It would be best if you had a unique place for a specific action to perform, then anti-ghosting is essential. Typically we denote this ability as NKRO, or N-key rollover. NKRO is typically a more expensive board because of this technology, and is typically sought after by gamers, less than typists.